Welcome back to Ignite the Fire, where we dive into messages from Flame Community Church.
And it's the Christmas season, you know?
It is.
So we're diving into a unique take on a familiar story.
Exactly. We're going to be exploring the often overlooked theme of obedience
Yeah.
in the life of Joseph.
You know, it's so easy to get caught up in the heartwarming aspects of the Christmas story.
It is.
But Joseph's journey offers a powerful perspective on what it means to truly trust and follow God.
Okay, so let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Yeah, the typical Christmas story, we focus on those happy donkeys and smiling travelers.
All right.
But Joseph's story is a bit different, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
It's marked by real struggles and doubts.
A lot of struggles and doubts.
Think about it. Mary and Zechariah both had pretty undeniable proof of God's intervention.
Right.
But Joseph, he only had a dream to go on.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And it makes his faith that much more remarkable, right?
It does. It does.
I mean, if someone told me today that they were going to have a baby and an angel told them in a dream, I'd have some questions.
Yeah, I think we all would.
I would?
It's a great example of how obedience often requires us to step outside our comfort zones and trust in God's guidance, even when we don't have all the answers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's talk about those difficult times
Yeah.
that Joseph faced.
Yeah,
I mean, starting with the scandal of Mary's pregnancy,
definitely.
that's a lot to take in.
Can you imagine the social pressure and judgment he was facing?
I know.
You know, his initial plan was to divorce Mary quietly,
Right.
which shows his good character,
It does.
but also highlights that even with good intentions,
Right.
our way isn't always God's way.
And that's where the angel's message comes in.
Right.
It completely changes the game.
Yeah.
Not only does the angel reveal the truth of Mary's conception,
Right.
but also connects it back to prophecy.
It does.
You know, it really drives home the point that God's plan is often so much bigger than our immediate difficulties.
It is. It's a profound lesson in surrendering our will to a higher power. I think it's something that, you know, we can all relate to.
We can.
We all face tough times in our lives, but Joseph's story reminds us that trusting God, even when it doesn't make sense, can ultimately lead to peace
Right.
and the fulfillment of his purpose for our lives.
It's so easy to get caught up in trying to fix things ourselves,
It is.
you know, but sometimes the bravest and most faithful thing we can do
Yeah.
is surrender
Is surrender and trust God.
and trust God.
Yeah. And sometimes trusting God means going to some pretty unexpected places.
It does.
Like with Joseph's second dream,
Okay.
where he's told to flee to Egypt,
So picture this. You're a young family, you've just had a baby,
right?
and now you're being told to flee to a dangerous, unfamiliar land.
Yeah, talk about feeling distant from everything you know and love.
I know.
It's a situation that many can relate to, especially during the holidays. You
Yeah.
know, there's that feeling of distance,
Yeah.
of being uprooted,
Yeah.
even when we're surrounded by family and friends.
Yeah.
You know, it's easy to feel alone in a crowd.
Right, especially if you're going through something difficult.
Exactly.
It's almost ironic, right? We celebrate this season of togetherness.
They do.
But for many, it can actually highlight feelings of isolation
Yeah.
or being far from God.
That's why it's so crucial to remember the core message of Christmas. God is always with us, even when we feel distant.
Right.
Emmanuel, God with us.
That's it.
That promise is woven into the very fabric of the Christmas story
Right.
and applies just as much today as it did then.
So even when we feel lost or alone, or like we're in a foreign land,
Yeah.
we're not truly alone.
You're never truly alone.
That's a really comforting thought, especially this time of year.
It is, and that's not the end of Joseph's journey of obedience, is it?
It's not.
You know, it's not just about grand gestures or dramatic escapes.
Right.
It's also about the everyday,
Right.
the seemingly mundane decisions.
Yeah.
Like when Joseph receives his final dream, calling him back to Nazareth.
That's a good point. You know, we often think of obedience in terms of these big life-altering decisions.
We do.
But Joseph's story shows us that it's also about those daily choices,
It is.
the small acts of trust and surrender.
Think about it. Even in something as simple as choosing where to live,
Right.
Joseph was still seeking and following God's guidance.
Right.
It underscores that consistent obedience, the choices we make every day, they're the building blocks for a strong foundation in our lives.
It's like that parable Jesus told about the wise and foolish builders.
It is.
Hearing God's word is good,
It's good,
but it's the obedience, the building on solid rock,
Right.
that helps us withstand life's storms.
Exactly. And it's a reminder that obedience isn't about earning God's favor. It's about living in alignment with his will.
Right.
We shouldn't treat it like a transactional coupon book where we're checking off good deeds.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah,
I think we've all fallen into that trap at some point, haven't we?
I know I have.
Trying to earn God's love
Yeah, it's a common misconception.
by doing all the right things.
It is, but true obedience flows from a heart transformed by love and gratitude for what God has already done for us.
Right.
It's about recognizing that His ways are higher than our own and that surrendering to His plan brings true freedom.
It makes you think about Joseph's overall legacy.
It
You
does.
don't see him seeking recognition or boasting about his sacrifices.
Right.
He simply trusts God and acts accordingly.
He exemplifies profound faith through his consistent obedience.
It's amazing.
And while we don't know the details of his later life, the example he sets at the beginning of Jesus' story, it speaks volumes.
It really
It's
does.
a legacy worth emulating, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it also begs the question, can the same be said of us?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it?
Are we living lives marked by that same kind of quiet, consistent obedience?
Right.
Or are we still stuck in that transactional mindset, treating obedience like a chore instead of a joyful response to God's love?
It's a challenging question, but one worth pondering, and that's what we'll continue to explore as we dive deeper into Joseph's story in part 2.
We will.
We'll unpack the practical implications of his obedience for our lives today and discover how we can cultivate that same spirit of trust and surrender.
Because ultimately, Joseph's story reminds us that true obedience isn't about grand gestures or trying to earn God's approval.
It's not. It's about aligning ourselves with his will
It is.
and experiencing the fullness of life that he intends for us.
And as we approach this Christmas season, it's the perfect time to reflect on how we can embody obedience like Joseph,
It is.
offering our lives as an act of worship, just like Paul encourages us to do in Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2.
It's about taking the mundane, the ordinary, and infusing it with meaning and purpose. By aligning our actions with God's will, it's about making every decision, every task, an offering of love and obedience to our Creator.
So let's continue this conversation in part 2 and see what other profound lessons we can glean from this often overlooked figure in the Christmas story.
We'll come back to ignite the fire as
Right.
we continue our deep dive into Joseph's obedience.
Okay.
I want to shift our focus to a pretty fascinating detail. His 3 dreams.
3 dreams. That's got to be significant, right? It's not just random.
Definitely not. Definitely not.
Okay.
Each dream serves as a pivotal point in Joseph's journey,
Okay.
offering him both crucial guidance and reassurance during uncertain times.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Walk me through these dreams, what made them so important.
Well, the first dream, as we discussed earlier, addressed the scandal of Mary's pregnancy.
Right.
Remember, the angel appeared to Joseph and said, "Joseph, son of David, do not feel to take Mary as your wife, for that which is conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit." Matthew chapter 1, verse 20.
Right. It was a direct command from God to trust the divine plan, even when it defied, social norms and expectations.
Absolutely.
He must have taken incredible courage to follow through on that.
Absolutely. Imagine receiving life-altering news in a dream.
I know.
Would you trust it?
I don't know.
Joseph's obedience to this first dream, despite the potential for ridicule and shame,
Right.
speaks volumes about his unwavering faith. It makes you wonder how we handle those leaps of faith in our own lives today.
That's a really good question. It's easy to get caught up in what others think
It is.
or to let fear dictate our decisions.
It is.
But Joseph's example challenges us to prioritize our relationship with God above all else.
Exactly. And that leads us to the second dream, where God instructs Joseph to flee to Egypt with his family.
Yeah.
This dream highlights the very real dangers surrounding Jesus' birth.
Yeah.
Herod's decree to kill all male infants in Bethlehem, Matthew chapter 2, verses 16 through 18,
Wow.
was a chilling premonition of the opposition Jesus would face even as a child.
It's a stark reminder of the harsh realities of that time. It makes Joseph's decision to flee even more significant.
Absolutely.
He was literally risking everything to protect Jesus.
He was. His immediate obedience to this dream underscores the immense responsibility he felt for Jesus' safety. It also reminds us of the sacrifices
Yes.
we're sometimes called to make when we choose to follow God.
It makes you think about the emotional toll that journey must have taken.
It does.
Imagine fleeing to a foreign land with a young family, facing the unknown, feeling far from everything familiar.
Yeah, that resonates with so many people today who have experienced displacement or have felt like outsiders.
It does.
You're right. It's a reminder that even in those distant places, even when we feel alone and far from everything we know,
Right.
God is with us.
Yes.
That promise of Emmanuel, of God with us
Powerful.
resonates deeply in those moments of uncertainty and displacement.
It's a comfort knowing that no matter where life takes us, we're never truly alone. But what about the third dream?
Yeah.
What message did that hold for Joseph?
The third dream called Joseph back to Israel after Herod's death.
Okay.
This dream signified a new chapter, a return to familiar territory.
Right.
However, even in this seemingly straightforward directive, we see God's meticulous guidings at play.
What do you mean by that?
Well, Joseph was warned in a dream to avoid Judea because Herod's son, Archelaus, was ruling with the same tyranny as his father.
Wow.
The angel told Joseph, "Get up, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel, for those who are seeking the child's life are dead." Matthew chapter 2, verse 20.
Okay.
He was then directed to settle in Nazareth,
Okay.
a seemingly insignificant town in Galilee.
It's amazing how God orchestrates every detail, weaving seemingly disparate threads to fulfill his ultimate purpose.
He does.
It reminds me of the verse in Proverbs chapter 16, verse 9 that says, "The heart of man plans his way, but the Lord establishes his steps."
Exactly. And throughout all of this, Joseph's willingness to follow each dream,
Right.
each divine prompt,
Right.
demonstrates his unwavering trust in God's plan. It's like he surrendered to the flow of God's will,
Yeah.
allowing himself to be guided by a divine compass.
That's such a powerful image.
It is.
You know, it makes me think about how often we try to control the situation instead of trusting God's navigation.
And that surrender, that willingness to let go of our own plans
Right.
and embrace God's design is at the heart of true obedience.
It is.
Joseph's story reminds us that it's not about blindly following rules or clinging to rigid principles.
It's more about fostering a close relationship with God, right?
It is.
A relationship where we're constantly seeking his guidance,
Yeah.
listening for his voice,
Yes.
and responding with open hearts.
Precisely. It's recognizing that God sees the bigger picture,
Right.
that intricate tapestry of our lives,
Right.
and knows the best path for each of us.
Even when that path leads through difficult times, unexpected detours, and seemingly mundane daily routines,
Yeah.
we can trust that he's with us every step of the way.
He is. Joseph's life definitely wasn't easy.
No.
He faced challenges that would have tested anyone's faith.
He did.
But despite those challenges, Joseph remained steadfast in his obedience, trusting that God would guide and provide for him.
He did.
His life story serves as a powerful reminder for us today.
A reminder that obedience isn't a burden, but a blessing, right? It's not about earning God's favor, but about aligning ourselves with his will
It is.
and experiencing the full, abundant life he intends for us.
Exactly. And it's in that alignment, that surrender to his loving guidance,
Right.
that we discover the true essence of Christmas.
Yeah.
A celebration of God coming to dwell among us, to guide us, and to empower us to live lives of purpose and joy.
So Joseph's story, although set in the past,
Yes,
offers timeless wisdom and encouragement for us today.
it does.
It prompts us to examine our own hearts and ask, are we living lives of obedience?
Yeah, good question.
Are we seeking God's guidance in every decision, big or small?
Yes.
And are we willing to trust him even when the path ahead seems uncertain?
Those are definitely questions worth pondering as we continue our deep dive into Joseph's extraordinary journey in part 3.
Welcome back to Ignite the Fire.
As we wrap up our deep dive into the life of Joseph, I want to touch on something we mentioned earlier, his legacy.
It's easy to see Joseph as just a supporting character in the grand Christmas narrative.
Right.
But I think you're right, there's more to it, isn't there?
Definitely. His impact, while subtle, is undeniable. He embodies this quiet, consistent obedience,
Yeah.
living in humble submission to God's will.
And it's interesting because we don't even know the full scope of Joseph's life. The biblical account focuses on his role during Jesus' early years.
Exactly.
Right.
And yet those glimpses give us a vivid portrait of a man marked by faithfulness, courage, and an unwavering trust in God. Imagine the weight of responsibility he carried, protecting Mary, raising Jesus, navigating a world that often misunderstood their family dynamic.
That's a huge responsibility.
It is.
And he embraces it with grace and humility. It's a good reminder that true greatness isn't about seeking power or fame, but about serving something greater than ourselves.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah, it really makes you reevaluate your own priorities, doesn't it? Are we chasing accolades or striving to live a life that reflects those values of humility, obedience, and unwavering faith?
It's a question we should all be asking ourselves.
Yeah.
And Joseph's story highlights that obedience isn't about blindly following rules or striving for unattainable perfection.
It's not.
It's about cultivating a heart posture of surrender,
Yes.
a willingness to let go of our own plans
Yeah.
and embrace God's design.
Exactly. We have to remember that his ways are higher than our own, and that his wisdom surpasses our limited understanding.
Right.
There's freedom in that surrender, in letting go of control.
Absolutely. And just as life wasn't without challenges or moments of uncertainty, but through it all, he remained steadfast in his trust in God, letting that divine compass guide his steps.
It is. And that's the heart of his legacy, a testament to the transformative power of faith lived out in those everyday acts of obedience. It's a legacy that goes beyond time and culture, speaking to that deep human longing for purpose and meaning.
Right, that's good.
And it points us back to the source of that longing, a God who loves us, guides us, and empowers us to live lives that reflect his glory.
So, as we celebrate the birth of Jesus this Christmas season, let's take a moment to reflect on the life of Joseph and let his story inspire us and challenge us.
Absolutely.
Let's
Sorry.
be reminded of the power of quiet obedience and cultivate a heart posture of surrender,
Yes.
a willingness to trust God even when we can't see the path ahead.
Because it's in those acts of obedience, big and small, that we discover the true meaning of Christmas. A celebration of a God who chose to dwell among us, guide us, and empower us to live lives that reflect his love and grace.
May the legacy of Joseph's obedience inspire us to live lives that honor God and bring him glory.
Watch full sermons on Flame's Facebook, YouTube, or website. God bless, and see you next week.